Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Jenny David. Here. Craig Scott.
Here.
Ron Vaughn.
Present.
Brad Newbecker.
Here.
Mark Serbrook.
Present.
Any additions or corrections to the agenda?
None.
Commissioners? Tim?
Looks like you got the right one, so we're good.
Awesome.
Okay.
Item 2, public comments. Is there any public comment in the room? This is for agenda items only. 3 minutes, please. Any public comment in the room? Any public comment on the phone? No public comment on the phone. Appointments. 3A, Ryan Veeder, Planning and Zoning Administrator, related to zoning map amendment 01-22. Mr. Veeder, you're up.
Which one?
That's all.
That's the worst thing I do today.
Good morning.
Morning.
As you can see, probably in your packet, Planning Commission had a meeting on March 16th, I believe, to hear a rezoning our map amendment request for the corner of Gerald Miller and 55 for a change that zoning from agricultural to business for a retail store. After the hearing, Planning Commission actually decided to deny the request. Multiple reasons on that request, and I believe that, Tim, that was put on their resolution as well there. So, probably a bad location, best way to put that on. Bad location. Have established neighborhood there of residential homes. Retail can be a problem for residential properties. So I think that was the biggest cause. Fred would agree.
My take would be spot zoning.
And the specific case, it is a spot zone. When you take a district, two districts that are two separate districts, two different types of uses that they allow, put them next to each other. That's basically considered a spot zone. It's frowned upon, especially in the zoning enabling act and the planning enabling act that we have to get under. So that probably was the biggest reason for it, but the spot zone was going to create some.
If this was denied, how come it's,
difficulty.
I'm sorry. If this is denied, how come it's being brought to us?
I've never had one denied before. How many years of doing this, I've never had one denied, but still the ordinance states that it doesn't say on an approval, the way the ordinance states that that map amendment does come before you.
Some statutory requirement, planning commission is only a recommending body.
Correct.
This board actually has the final say on all ordinances, including zoning ordinances. So in order for this to be voted up or down, it must come here.
Correct. Tim is correct. This is a recommendation from the planning commission.
If, since the Dollar General got denied there, if this does get approved through the board, another business could possibly go in there in the future, correct?
So I think the way that this is set up is, or at least the language in the ordinance.
We have about a dozen different criteria points that we went down the list and to see what applied to it and what didn't. It was pretty much what didn't apply, overruled what did. So there is some permitted uses there for some businesses, but not all businesses. You know,
But if it stays agricultural,
there is
no
some-
business can go there, correct?
No, there are some permitted businesses that you can put there as zoned agriculture in the zoning code. I think.
But it's very
family-
limited?
I think daycare, I think is.
It is
family-
limited.
I think.
and they
there's
are
family
more-
daycare, family care.
Yeah,
or
daycare,
Adult foster care, I think is a permitted use.
storage facilities, foster care facilities. There are some more
Storage to a certain extent.
correct.
Um,
Livestock, obviously, country clubs, golf courses, public or private campgrounds, group daycare, junk or salvage yards, schools, churches, kennels, bed and breakfast, cemeteries, mini storage, planned unit developments, municipal buildings, airport, airfields, runways, contractor storage buildings, vehicle repair service centers, adult foster care, solar farms are another use and special use in that district as well too. So there are a lot of
Those are
uses.
Special uses,
Those are special uses.
but there are permitted uses that are businesses.
In the permitted, yeah, family daycare homes, home occupations, greenhouses, nurseries would be a permitted use as well too.
See,
That's if it's changed to business, correct?
No, that's in an agricultural zoned area. Spinning around short. If it's permitted use, you don't need to get a special use for it. You don't have to ask to do it. Like, if
These are
it's a
permitted, no
special
special
use,
permission is required for a permitted use.
Okay.
Obviously permits, you would still have to have your permits for those, your building, your zoning permits for that. Based on the ordinance, you would have to meet what's in the ordinance for that specific use, but no special permission is required from the planning board. So,
Opinions, commissioners. Commissioner Vaughn?
Oh, everybody I've talked to didn't want it in there anyway, so I'm good.
Leave it as is.
It is.
Commissioner Serbrook or Commissioner?
well, as I said, we went down the list of criteria points and took a look at what applied to it and what did, because we're bound. I mean, you can't just, this is the thing people don't understand with zoning. You can't make decisions based on you don't like Dollar
Right.
General. You'll turn around and get a lawsuit right back at you.
Can't make a personal decision.
Follow the criteria.
yeah, and unfortunately,
That's my official statement. We follow the criteria in the ordinance.
unfortunately, a lot of times those comments and things are, especially in this particular case, there were a lot of individuals that weren't happy with Dollar General. Unfortunately, when we're rezoning it, we're looking at it as the use, not as the person or the company that's doing the use. So, and that's one of the things that they have to look at when we're rezoning that from ag to B1. We are looking at a specific use for it, which in this case was retail. However, rezoning that parcel opens that up to all the uses in that business district and all the special uses. Which I think was determined in that area wasn't a good fit for that area. So not only are we looking at current, what it may be used for now, 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, that may not be the case for that.
So do we need a resolution to deny this?
You do, and this is the whole due process of the applicant, so they can therefore get an answer up or down, one way or another.
Okay, so I think we're all in agreement to keep it as is, so we'll put that on for the next,
Tuesday, yes.
yes, Tuesday. Anything else?
No, any other questions?
I asked at the last meeting if we could have the other amendments on the agenda. The ones we tabled.
Tabled those, and you can always take them off the table.
So, well, then, for this meeting, since the zoning administrator is here, I'd like to take them off, make a motion to take them off the table.
Oh, for
We don't-
here.
we
No, you
can't-
don't
we
need
can't
to
do- no,
it.
it's just
Talk about
discussion.
it here.
Okay, we can
Right,
discuss.
yeah, you can talk.
All right, then fine. I guess I'm gonna ask my colleagues, what's the problem with passing the amendments that were recommended by the planning commission? The amendments, not the other stuff that people are reading into this thing.
I was under the impression that as a result of what we got from the county attorney, that there was going to be some adjustment to the sign portion of it.
Which we're gonna pull that, planning to commission discuss that.
So I thought that there was going to be, I thought they were going to reintroduce those text amendments with the adjustments to the sign portion of it. And I'll be honest with you right now, I'm going to vote no with the way it is. If each one of these individual text amendments came up separately, I might vote differently. Matter of fact, I would vote differently. But as a group, if it's all or none, then it's none for me. Pure and
Based on,
simple.
based on the signs?
No, 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 no.
What-
I've got
what other
specific
ones?
issues with
Yeah.
2 out of the 3. All right, so if it came up, individually, as opposed to all 3 text amendments in one resolution, I'm gonna vote no.
What are the 2?
Yeah, you
The
told
tiny
us.
homes and the RV issue.
Okay.
So what's the issue with the minimum size home?
I've talked to several people and they're just not in favor of it. They don't want a tiny house next to their property.
So what are they, what size home, if we were
They're
Are
happy
they-
with it is, the way it is right now.
720 square foot, they don't want to go anything less than that?
So Mark, just to be fair and just explain for you too, that 400 square feet, the reduction from 720 to 400 square feet, it would allow a tiny home as well too.
Right.
One thing that we do have in Ogemaw County is a lot of cabins as well, too, that are sub 720 square feet.
Thoroughly understand
Unfortunately,
that.
we have more and more people moving up this way, taking those cabins, trying to enlarge them. So at this point in time, if they were to take a 500 square foot cabin and wanted to put an addition on it, they would be required to take it.
Bring it up.
700.
Right, to bring it up to.
So that was part of the reasoning behind this as well, too, to help those individuals.
Right.
But I understand your point. So.
Well,
And I understand all of yours, maybe hesitancy to vote on this as a whole. I guess I would ask Tim, I think we could, with a resolution, we could break this down individually for each one. Could we not?
Address each one by itself if you wanted to, yeah.
Change the resolution and add maybe each amendment as A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. They could be voted on individually if you like.
Oh, I'm talking separate resolution for each
Or
one.
a separate
so
resolution for each one.
That way it's very clean.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yeah, and that's, I met with Hill Township the other night and told them about this. Other people that I've talked to, again, I don't know the proper term. Again, like Mark said, pork belly. There's a lot of things,
Correct.
Added in there. If you did individual,
Sure.
things, it'd be easier to vote on.
And it would be, and one of the things that the planning commission is looking for from the commissioners too, if these are voted down or they're not up to, if there are things you would like changed, those comments can be addressed as well too. For instance, if there's a specific part of a specific amendment that you're not in favor of, the planning commission can always look at that as well too.
Well,
And bring it
in,
back.
in all honesty, and I know quite a few people out around Lake Ogemaw. I've talked to quite a few people. This issue of the campers and whatnot was basically started out there. From what I've been told, 90% of the people out there don't want this. So if we're voting the way our constituents want, and what I've heard, I'm kind of with Mark. It's probably not going to pass me.
But the one thing that bothered me in this whole process was, and it didn't come up until the Dollar General. I think in that packet, I had sent you all the correspondence that Churchill Township had received at their public hearing in regards to Dollar General. And there was one correspondence that really stuck out to me. And some of the individuals that I've talked to out there would agree as well too. There are a contingent of people out there that, especially with the Dollar General, one individual's comments were, we're not coming to a meeting to speak out against it. We're actually in favor of it. Unfortunately, the last time we spoke out in favor of something, our houses were vandalized, our vehicles were vandalized. So in that particular, I think there's a strong contingent of people that are afraid. And unfortunately, this issue doesn't affect probably 90% of the county because they just don't have somebody in a camper next door to them. So it's hard to weigh how this would affect somebody or me as a property owner if I don't have it next door. So that's my worry with that. Is that there are a lot of people out there following the ordinance. I was extremely surprised when I did drive around the county and look at the storage places around the county and the actual number of campers that are being stored in the storage places. There are way more campers being stored the proper way than there are individuals I've heard from that are against this. So that's my concern.
Commissioner Newbecker?
I agree with both of those guys. We need to do it separately.
Commissioner Scott?
Well, as the commissioner on the planning commission, well, I haven't been in favor of titling tiny home on any of the text amendments. We're reducing the size, the minimum size of the home, 720 to 400. Correct me if I'm wrong, a duplex can be 720 square foot.
Yeah.
So that
Actually,
means,
an apartment
means-
complex could be
yeah, you
small.
can have a duplex with 2 400 square foot apartments in it and build in a R1 district. That's a permitted use as a duplex. So you can already have 2 400 square foot homes on a lot. They're just joined together in one house. I mean, so now you got 2 families living in smaller square footage. You know,
Right.
and so, you know, I just don't see, I don't see the issue. I think what happens is when you title it tiny home, some reality TV show comes to mind. And you think you're living, and then everybody thinks you're running up to buy an Amish barn and set it on a lot. This is not that at all. This 400 square foot home has to be built by code. It has to be. There is no variable to it. Those people that build sheds and want to make it a house, they're illegal. They're illegal. If they want to live in it on the weekends, they're illegal. It's not a dwelling. Same with RVs. There is an RV manufacturer out there that will sign off saying this is a permanent dwelling. Okay? Well, mobile home, they follow BOCA building codes and they'll sign off that it's a dwelling. But there's no manufacturer, I don't care if it's the super insulated winter model, it is not a permanent dwelling. And like this RV thing, the largest amount of people that came in and argued about the RV ordinance, they argued about a point that we're not changing. They came in and argued a point that's been in effect for 25 years, and we're not even changing. We're not even addressing it all. And they come in with these ideas that we're forcing us down their throat. It's been there for 25 years. Somebody 25 years ago, and not us, forced it down their throat.
What are, as far as the minimum square footage, what is our neighboring counties doing? Do they have theirs down to 400 square feet?
There are a few communities in Michigan that have enacted what we call tiny home ordinances. There's a few up by Traverse City, Brinley. I think there's a few others. Detroit has some tiny home neighborhoods actually going in that have been erected.
Well, I ask a Roscommon, I mean, directly around us.
I haven't seen anything in their ordinances yet. Most of the individuals, or most of the ones that I've seen and the ones I've looked at throughout the country to also allow the mobile, tiny home to come in on wheels as well too. They're not put on permanent foundations. I think that's where we differ from any of the other ones out there, requiring them to be permanent structures on a foundation. They're not movable. That's, I think, where we differ. We do understand the concerns that you may have with it. Through the discussions of that, there were some other types of steps to go through for those that we considered. One point, I think we discussed making that a special use in those districts.
These text amendments are
Which would we-
discussions, probably 7, 8 meetings, 7, 8 months of talking back and forth. And the pros, the cons, and this and that. This isn't just like we shook the dice, threw it on the table and said, hey, let's make this change.
You said that, you've said that. I see both sides of this. You know, with the cost being so high with building and not seeing an end in sight, that I understand that 400 square feet, but I also see the, you know, the possible negativity to that. You know, is this smaller place going to be taken care of?
Yeah, I understand both sides, and I believe planning commission does as well too. They, obviously, this is, we want to use all the tools available to us. You are part of those tools because you hear and you talk with the townships. Maybe more so than those that would actually come to our meeting and want to be in front of the public and give their concerns. So
Surprisingly, in my townships, I have not had any kickback on that. So,
Well, we got 3 township board members set on the planning commission. Horton, Foster, no, Dan isn't Dan's not on the board. Rob Reed's the supervisor at Hill Township, that's on a planning commission now. He just got on a couple months ago. George Goodchilds from Horton Township, the treasurer up there. Dan Domleski came from Foster Township, and we got people diverse around the county on the planning commission. So I think you're hearing.
there's a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience on that board. However, nothing is perfect. If we could create the perfect ordinance, it would save us all a lot of time and trouble. However, but we do take your concerns as well too. I think the important part with the amendments is to pass the ones that you're comfortable with. And if you're not comfortable with them, we can send them back to the planning commission with some recommendations and they can re-review.
are you guys ready to put them on at the next meeting individually, or do you want to break them down at the next committee of the whole and discuss them individually?
I think you could probably put them on.
I'm ready. I
To
say
vote on?
Put the 3 of them on for the next meeting.
You guys
It's
comfortable with that?
my biggest issue over the whole thing, again, you know, on the campers and whatnot, I don't know if it's that much of a camper issue or a tiny home. I've heard nothing on that. It's a blight issue.
Correct.
And the blight issue goes back to the townships, you know,
And that's something through communication I'm hoping to handle. I have spoken with one. I did hear from not the township, but one township actually just got rid of their blight ordinance. So some of the individuals in the township have called me and they're not happy with it. So I'm going to be reaching out to them to see what we can do to help them. I think they believe their ordinance was unenforceable.
well,
Which,
I guess that's kind of what needs to be done, is figure out an ordinance that can be enforced. And for the townships to get a blight officer, each of them, and to enforce this and to take care of it. And it would definitely help the county.
I believe that as well too. I think if we can get the townships on board with it, one of the biggest problems I hear with blight is finding someone to enforce it.
Sure.
If we had 11 or 12 municipalities that are all enforcing the blight ordinance, we might be able to find one person that would handle that job for all of them. Or a couple people that might be able to handle the job. To be honest with you, in most townships, blight is 4, 5, 6 properties. It's not a full-time or even a part-time job for somebody. So if we could find somebody that was qualified and townships were in agreement with it, we might be able to find someone that could help everyone as well too.
It would also be beneficial if all the blight ordinances were the same for each township.
And I've had some discussion with Treasurer Karen Piglowski on it as well too, with our attorney being on a retainer. I think we might be able to get a sample ordinance from him that might work, that could be changed to meet each township's need or
That would be great.
amended to meet their needs, and would be an enforceable document as well too. Because that trickle down effect does trickle down there as well too. So,
Absolutely.
we want to take care of those issues before those properties are coming back to the county and tasked with cleaning up. So,
Right. Thank
You
you.
know, the thing is, that, you know, it doesn't go, the house doesn't go right from 720 down to 400. There can be anything in between that, you know.
Yes.
The thing
Your
is-
minimum square
The
footage.
thing you're hurting here in the county and is the price of housing is going up so fast that affordable housing, we talk about affordable housing, you know, the people that come here, that even a couple, and they work at, they don't work a highly educated job, say both of them work at, one works at Walmart, one works at Myers. Here, we just got 300 brand new jobs at Myers, you know. What can they afford? I mean, you're building houses at $130,000, $140,000. It's a minimum house anymore.
Very minimal.
Yeah,
that today
mean-
is 300,000 with prices of materials and availability.
right. You know, what's it take, you know? And even at 400 square foot, even if you go to the minimum and build it by code, you're still talking about $50,000, $60,000 house. That's just what I'm saying. It's not a shed sitting on the ground. It's a code built house, you know.
Thank you. We're gonna put that on. We're gonna put those three individual on. Oh,
Ryan, your challenge is by 3 o'clock tomorrow, I need draft resolutions. All right. You're the guy to do it, 'cause I'm not sure exactly how the parsing will go.
I will have that for you by 3 o'clock tomorrow.
thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Item 3B, Brian Gilbert Sheriff related to the jail diversion agreement. I'm assuming you guys are.
Proxy.
Well, you're not gonna have the other heater guy come in?
That's gonna be like ongoing, right?
He can sit back.
He's not gonna leave it alone, you know that.
Just like the other thing that
He'll
you
just
have.
sit back in the gallery instead.
There you go. That's what I was waiting for.
He does have.
Would you like to come on up, sir? Okay.
That's the right answer.
I don't have much for you. You should have all received it on your packet as far as the Saco Valley Community Mental Health contract.
No.
Yeah,
Can you explain? I read through it last night. Can you, how did this come about, I guess?
I'm not 100% because Lieutenant Ozier is obviously in charge of it with the jail. I believe this is a legacy. There's been some form of this in some fashion, and they're just putting it into a contract that kind of documents what the intent is with the local police agencies, the prosecutor, and the court. And in summary, from what I've looked at, it's if we have mental health people with misdemeanors and nonviolent type stuff to try to divert them from jail time as opposed get them treatment and other type of things. So
Is this gonna be one individual assigned to all these tasks that's listed in here?
the way I read it, there's going to be representatives from each of the different, so somebody in each of these organizations, like for the sheriff's office, it would be Lieutenant Ozier would be in charge, and then the chief would assign somebody in each of the police departments to have input in this process with a SABO. So you identify somebody with a mental health issue that has been charged with a misdemeanor. The prosecutor's office is going to be key to it too, from what I can see, making a decision that deferred prosecution or that they're eligible for a program, along with obviously the ASABO mental health officials, because they're going to be the ones that are making diagnosis, I would assume, to say that this person needs treatment as opposed to incarceration.
Or may be involved in treatment already, but got incarcerated,
They got incarcerated, yeah, that same thing too.
not knowing that maybe they don't have the mental capability to know that they committed a crime.
I could agree, yeah.
It could be something
That
like
could be
that.
something
Say
too,
maybe
yeah.
they went and shoplifted because they just thought that it's okay to do that because that's their capacity.
Mhm.
Is this gonna be a full-time position or is this gonna be an as-needed position?
I don't see this as an additional position. I don't see that in this contract. You, Tim?
No, what this really does is just provide some substance to what responsibilities are for each of the signees on the contract. And just over the years, the community mental health agencies have relied on these contracts frankly, to give them the contact information they need, so they know who's calling. But then they each understand the roles and responsibilities of the other. I've witnessed a couple of times where there've been breakdowns in a system like this, and we have people doing one of these in terms of somebody who fell through the cracks. This really helps plug that. There's no additional cost to it. It's using personnel who are already assigned to each of the organizations listed, but really just laying out the roles and responsibilities for each person, so we don't have an unreasonable expectation, in this case of maybe the CMH employee, in terms of making determinations and calls. Ultimately, the prosecuting attorney, judges, all are making those final decisions. But ultimately, if somebody does not need to be incarcerated, but needs the services of community mental health, they get diverted in that direction.
Or even separated from the rest of the population too, could be a recommendation from
yeah,
the.
In this case, this is a diversion in particular. We're trying to get people who don't need to be in jail off from that track and more to an area that's going to get them the assistance that they need.
Yes, yeah.
And as we all know, mental health issues, there's a lot of people that get incarcerated that have mental health issues that should not be incarcerated. And I think, again, like the sheriff said, this is kind of a legacy thing that's been going on. They're just laying a clear set of, I won't say rules, but responsibilities for each, Saddle Valley is responsible for this, the sheriff's responsible for that, the prosecutor's office. So that everybody knows what their role is in the whole thing. We don't want to see somebody incarcerated that's got mental health issues when they don't belong there, and that's the whole idea of this program, is to divert those people to get them the help that they really need.
And everybody's
And not
satisfied,
locking them up.
and everybody's satisfied with the relationship and the communication with Saddle Valley and
Yeah, it looks very.
It's always a work in progress with any of these type of situations, but yeah.
And
Each of the
Saddle Valley's
entities have,
always been, and they're shorthanded, don't get me wrong,
yeah.
like everybody else, but from what my experience with them has always been, they're doing their doggonest at taking help. There may not always be a placement facility for somebody that needs diversion, but man, they try. They really, really do.
the biggest
so
challenge.
they have the staff to be able to offer these services.
Yeah, I believe they do. It's really just gonna be like, with city PD, Ken or his lieutenant, they're gonna have to be the liaison for West Branch PD. So it'll be the same thing at the jail. It's Lieutenant Ozier would be the first level, or his designee, which would be the Sergeant Howard, would be a liaison for this program.
No,
Who pays for this?
I don't see a problem. Let's,
Just because I didn't see anything about, obviously it's not about funding,
Right.
but who pays for these services? Just a
They're
question I
already-
had.
We have a contribution that we put into CMH every year,
Okay,
coming part of that, and I'm sure they have other funding sources too for this kind of program. All of the other agencies you see listed, it's part of their routine responsibility. It's no additional cost.
I would think with the diversion too, that would be prosecutor and courts would divert funds as opposed to put them in incarcerating them.
Mhm.
Those funds, same funds would divert to the
Right, yeah, same people doing, but just a different option for an outcome.
different path. Helps for lack of state mental health facilities. Anything else?
huge shortage with mental health. No, thank you very much.
can
Thanks, Paul.
any report from the sheriff's department? or
Now it's not the
anything?
committee of the whole. It's not a time for a report.
You'll have
Committee
one.
as a whole, it's a discussion.
He sent one yesterday that will be put out with your material for Tuesday. So under department reports, you'll have that.
Thank
Item
you.
10, I think it is.
Lieutenant Ozier has his.
Well, it's
Perfect.
chairman like us to
Karen.
talk to them all
Karen.
together instead of.
Karen, come on. We're gonna get to that, but now's really not the time. Karen, related to investment policy.
Yes, good morning, everyone. As you know, the county treasurer's office is learning, growing, and improving. And one of the things that we need to improve is the investment policy. Hasn't been reviewed since 2005. Prior to that, 1998. So I would like to have you at your next meeting approve a new investment policy, as well as a form that I've created to have our local financial institution agree that they are only utilizing my investments in compliance with Public Act 20. So there's a form for them to sign when I invest with them, that they acknowledge that what I'm investing in is in compliance with Public Act 20. It's a new standard that probably wasn't in place back in 2005, but it's on your iPads. If you could review that and please approve it at your next board meeting on Tuesday.
What's the biggest change from 2005 to current with the investment policy?
The biggest part is having the financial institutions sign a form.
Okay,
And let me go back and look at 2005. Could have supplied that to Tim as a comparison for you. This was 2005, a one pager. And then you have the new one in front of you. It speaks to what items the financial investor for the county can invest with that's in compliance with Public Act 20. This one from 2005 is very, very short, very minimal, doesn't go into any descriptives of the restrictions for the investment tools. It only addresses foreign currency risk, investment rate risk, credit risk. It's very, very plain Jane. So
So no,
it was probably the bare minimum at the time that was required. So
Alcona County treasurer back about 20 years ago took county funds, invested them offshore accounts.
and ended up in prison.
Yeah, ended up in prison and
Tom
the county,
Katona from Alcona.
that's right, and the county almost went belly up.
Yes.
It almost went right into receivership and everything.
He tested his own personal funds first and then decided it was a good idea and invested county funds and ended up in prison.
Tried to get a few others invested too.
do you have anything to add to this?
Just advice to Karen, if you find yourself in London talking to a Nigerian banker.
Right. Give it a second thought.
Just a second.
Give it a second thought because we laugh, but Alcona County actually
That's
did
what
that.
happened. He was
They
actually
actually
in
did that.
London, yeah.
Yeah.
Anything to add to this, Tim?
No, good idea, best practice. I can't speak positively enough about it. So there
Commissioners,
is a commit or a section in there that commits to keeping you informed as well through at least annual reporting of the investments.
Yeah, this is annual, but I'm creating some new spreadsheets. I gave a sample to Tim already of what I'm going to use as my reporting tool, and I'll try to do it to you on a quarterly basis, not just the annual that's listed here.
commissioners?
Good.
Just so we get a copy of the old one, just so we can compare.
The 2005? Sure, I'll email it out to you. Okay,
Commissioner Scott? No?
Nope, I'm good.
Perfect, thank you. Discussion items 4A, Rite Aid Vaccine Administration Program Agreement, Annual Flu Shot Clinic.
Hey, this was Rite Aid's actually getting way out in front of the curve on scheduling for next year's flu shots. We've been doing the annual flu shot clinic here for the last 2 years. We usually have set this up literally at the last minute. And what Rite Aid's doing now is saying, okay, we have this critical mass of people who we're serving. We'd like to schedule them in advance and get our contracts scheduled in advance. The terms of this agreement are exactly what we've had the last few years. Our employees will show up, they'll have their health insurance card, and that will take care of any additional costs. Any of our employees who are not insured or don't have that coverage, there would be like a $35 fee, and this would be like for non-covered dependents or whatever you might bring in. For the county, because we do have generally it's at least 20 people who sign up for this, there's no additional charge to the county. If we have fewer than that, we may get a $60 charge, but it's very minimal. It's been well received with the employees. The date, I'm racking my brain trying to remember the date, but it was mid to late October that we were going to have reserved. And this comes from the advice of the chair from the last few years. You don't want this to happen too soon, but then you don't want to wait too long either. So that seems to be a nice time of the year to do it. So that's it. It'd just be authorization of this contract and we'll get it scheduled and make it happen.
And it terminates March 31st of next year, so it doesn't just keep going.
Right. So there would be about this time next year, you'd see another one for 23.
Good that they're being proactive and getting this out to us. This is the last minute scramble. So I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, there's not
Wait.
really a pro to this. Commissioner Vaughn,
I'm good.
Commissioner Newbecker?
Sure.
All right, we'll put that on for a resolution. Commissioner Scott, I'm sorry.
This isn't a dollar amount where we have to do any kind of bidding.
No, we're nowhere
Pretty
near.
minimal.
Yeah, nowhere near that.
Item 3B, Maximus Consulting Service Cost Allocation Plan.
So this is another agreement that we do each year. I believe this is the last year of a 3-year agreement that we have with Maximus. We did have an option on this 3rd year to pick it up. This is the project that takes a look at our finances, used primarily by the court to determine where the charges come from. So there are certain administrative charges that we are able to recoup from the state, but the state wants backing to prove that in fact those are legitimate charges. So for instance, there is a component to the treasurer's office that goes into the child care fund. So just managing the money. So there's this plan will tell us what that amount is, and friend of the court can bill accordingly to the state. We do have other options or other opportunities with grants. They often ask about administrative costs. This cost allocation plan gives us the foundation to provide those costs and then incorporate those into the grants as well. Really not a discretionary item, at least not if we want reimbursement from the state for the court items, which we really do need. So it's about that $7,000 annual cost to it.
Questions? Commissioner Serbrook,
No,
Commissioner Scott?
Good to know.
I've seen this every year that I've been here. And it's been explained to me in different ways, but it's the state really looks at Maximus as this third party, right?
They do. There's one other group in the state that does these, but they are both Maximus and the other crew. I wish I could remember their name. Their clients rarely change, and mostly because of the familiarity with the county. They already know what our arrangement looks like and know how to do the divisions. But their real big task is this year is to look at our spending from last year and update all the numbers.
I'm good with it.
Commissioner Newbecker?
Good. You too? You're okay with it? You didn't say.
4C, Equalization / Planning and Zoning Vehicle.
Got the spec sheet from Gorno Ford. This is that vehicle that Brian Stein was mentioning. They had the 2 that they were going to purchase, and this one they would hold for us. You had mentioned, or we had a resolution at the last meeting under our ARPA arrangements. This is one of the expenses that you were in favor of. So we need to complete the process. That means bringing it to you, getting a resolution at the next meeting to authorize the purchase.
Can we authorize 2?
We did,
The same vehicle, correct?
same vehicle.
But this is only
I
covering,
brought it up the last meeting about going ahead and getting this. You guys thought that they wanted an SUV. Now that they've agreed that all the parties agree that a pickup truck is fine.
right. So, but this is only covering one of the 2 vehicals, correct?
This is
Is
the
this
third vehicle.
This would be the third.
Oh,
The first 2 went to the building department,
jeez.
This is for equalization of
right?
Building and
First 2 is building inspectors.
so it was
This one is
equalization,
shared between equalization and
planning.
zoning administrator, the first feeder.
Anything
No, the
else?
second.
Do you-
Oh, the second.
The second
one.
Okay.
How long is it gonna take to get these vehicles?
I believe Brian told me by mid-July, they would have all 3 of them here.
Okay. Anything, Commissioner Becker?
I think it was approved. I think it was approved on the,
But it was
through the ARPA funds.
in our master
Yeah.
plan. And yeah.
So we'll put this on for resolution. Okay. Item 4D, Administrator Performance Evaluation.
So I've given you section 6 out of my employment agreement, where there's a requirement that the board and I put together an evaluation tool for the board to use for evaluation. The contract states that this needs to happen annually. We just got too busy last year, but I want to make sure that we caught that this year. The second year will come up in mid-May. So now would be the time for us, I don't know how the board wants to approach this, but to put together whatever that evaluation tool is, get it disseminated, collect it, and complete the process.
Ideas. Commissioner Serbrook? You don't have any ideas
I went on the
on how
internet.
to do, pardon me? On how to do a performance evaluation?
I went on the internet and found some other municipality ones, and this one in Florida, I kind of like. They ran ranked 1 through 5, unsatisfactory to excellent. And the way that it's laid out and the overall rating and things like that, I kind of liked it. I would just like to, I would rather have a 1 through 10 or even a 1 through 100 scale. I'm the type of assessor that doesn't like to give all 5s. I don't like to give the perfect unless it's perfect. And, you know, everybody can do just a little bit more. So if I rank somebody a number 9, a number 4 sometimes isn't clear enough. 9 or 98 or something like that, to me, is clearer.
Okay.
You know, or at the other end, a 4 or a 5, you know. That's the only thing I like as a broader range of numbers for scoring purposes. But I like the content of that. There is a hot chocolate stain right there that you can just kind of go, you know.
So will you get us a copy of that so we can?
Sure.
Is that one for each one of us?
No,
Or just one?
yeah.
Commissioner Becker? Commissioner Munn?
Yeah, if we can get a copy of that, and then, like I say, it's gonna be basically all 5 of us, you know, same thing. You know, if you vote 4, 4, 4, 4, 4 on one thing, then you know it's gonna be a 4, and when you're all done, just put one form out. that Basically has the, you know, how it's rated.
So then do we complete this evaluation and then are we going to discuss it? Are we?
Yeah, typical process would be you complete the evaluation and then we go over it and point you to the last sentence in the contract where it says the board and I would further establish priorities among the various goals for the coming year, things that you'd like to see done. We did that shortly after I first arrived, but we were really hit with a tidal wave of things that had to get done. So, you know, we did accomplish those things, but this will get us back on course. You know, if there are specific projects the board wants to see accomplished by a certain date, we do that. Or if there's a certain management method you'd like to see a different direction on, we give a date to try to accomplish whatever that might be. This is, you know, evaluation that once the tallies are in, oftentimes the board will go into closed session to have those conversations. I am indifferent whether we do closed session or not. It's in the end, the result comes out. It's just how it is. So, but just keep that in the back of your mind. And I do appreciate Commissioner Scott's scale. He said going from satisfactory to excellent. So if we could just.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Well, Paul's here, you know, as mayor of the city now, you guys use like, I think 100, a 1 to 100 scale, don't you? You've done them in the
We've done
past.
them in the past. We're revamping one currently as we speak. We're in the same timeline as we're talking about here. So city manager and stuff for his annual evaluation. So council member Pugh is spearheading our revamp of the tool that we're going to use. But yes, there's usually a higher scale than 100.
You prefer that as a assessor?
As long as the actual content that you're evaluating, because there's a big question for us that we've talked about is council is the content. What are the questions that are being evaluated? Are they fair or partial? Can you fairly evaluate that? So that's one of the big keys that we're looking at currently is the content of each of the evaluation points, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm good with a 0 to 10. I think a 0 to 100 is a little complex. I don't know why necessarily, but I like the
Take a
10.
look at the sample things and then maybe you think about it different.
I will, and I think now is the
Maybe
time
come
as
around
well
my
to
way
bring,
of thinking.
I doubt it. Now is also the time, I think, that you and I had a conversation, Commissioner Scott, along with Tim. I've been in Tim's office a couple times discussing this. When Tim's position was really being sold to us from Commissioner Scott, it was basically utilizing Tim as a communicator, a central locator for all of us commissioners. Because at that time, we were really struggling with individual commissioners communicating with individual department heads, elected officials, and we really wanted this central person to be our eyes, our ears, our communication. And I think now is the time also to put that back out there, that I'm seeing that happen again. I feel that I think it's nice when all of us 5 commissioners come in here, we're all on the same playing field. We all have the same information. That department heads, elected officials all go to Tim, and then Tim disperses the information versus more one-on-one communication. You were part of that conversation, Commissioner Scott, and I gave you some examples. I thought they were pretty clear. Do you have anything to add to that? Granted, I don't think we're ever going to
I'll
stop.
agree that you thought they were clear.
Granted, I don't think that's ever going to totally stop, but I think now's the time to put it out there as a friendly reminder. And the example that we used was the medical examiner meeting that the rest of us didn't know about, that you were called specifically, Commissioner Serbrook. And granted, you were definitely the best one to serve on that board, without a doubt, and I'm sure that we all would have agreed on that, but we didn't know about that meeting. I'm glad we were informed of it. You brought it up because it was almost forgot about. But
Like I said, the prosecutor is the one that contacted me, and it was
correct.
a few days
But
before the
that
meeting.
should have went to Tim, and then it should have came to all of us, and then I'm sure we would have chosen you or the entire law enforcement committee, which then would have been Commissioner Newbecker as well, which he didn't know anything about.
Right.
And I brought up the example to Commissioner Scott. I was still looking at me, Commissioner
Yeah, I'm
Scott,
completely lost right
asking
now.
you, but that's okay, asking you about the position and why didn't you come to me? In the middle of that meeting, why didn't you?
The part-time person.
Correct.
We're sitting here.
And I said, sitting in Tim's office, no, I disagree with what Commissioner Scott said. That should have been brought to us like it was, all at one time, all the information put out on the table. That way we all could make a decision and ask questions at that time. So that was another example that I gave Commissioner Scott.
At the same time, though, I didn't say that I wanted her to lobby me to do that position. Just let me know that it was coming up. You know, I think maybe
I did.
mention it. Well, then I forgot then.
Commissioner Newbecker, do you have anything to add to the conversation?
No, I think it's a very valid point, though. We definitely hired Tim to be our liaison. And that should be an equal liaison to every commissioner. And I have felt that in certain times, some of us have gotten information that others have not. And that definitely needs to be addressed, but we'll move forward.
Commissioner Vaughn?
Well, I think you pretty well know, and Tim and I have talked about this, I wasn't a proponent for the position when it started. Very happy with the work he's done for us, and I think, in all honesty, he's been an asset to the whole group. So, we move forward from here and bigger and better.
Mr. Serbrook?
Well, I know what it was like before the county had an administrator, and I think it's probably the smartest thing you guys ever did, quite frankly. I think it was a huge step in the right direction. I'm glad that it happened. It
Commissioner
was
Scott?
something that had been discussed for years and years and years and just never moved off center. And I'm glad you guys were able to make it happen. Like I said, I think it's been very, very beneficial to Ogemaw County as a whole.
Commissioner Scott?
Well, I think that from time to time, like Ron and Mark and I, they'd have much more time to interact with people in the county than the other two, because you're working and we're not, basically. And I come down here probably at least two days a week. And so I'm going to interact with somebody. Now, I want to tell you that I'll go and talk with Tim and tell him what interactions I have with people and what discussion points there has been and stuff like that. So he's aware of it. And when you guys come in and got a question, I know that it's free for him to say to you, well, some of this has been talked about or something like that, or he just can expand in his knowledge with you, doesn't have to be a he said, she said thing. But it's just gonna happen. I mean, you see people, I mean, thing about that, I was surprised when I heard that Brad was not involved in that medical examiner thing, because I got a call from the prosecutor asking me if I was available a particular day, and I said, well, yeah, I am. And then it was, aren't you, well, it's the law enforcement committee. I said, well, I'm not on the law enforcement committee. Oh, well, I said, that's Lou Becker and Serbrook. Then she said, okay, well then we don't need you then. So I assumed, because I wasn't going to be involved in it, that the other members of the law enforcement committee be asked. I'm disappointed that Brad didn't get an ask, because that's why we have committees. That's why we have committees, to be liaisons between these other units and the board, because otherwise we'd have to have full quorums and public meetings or talk to a department head if we had everybody here. I
think it just comes down to communication.
Well, it
Plain and
does.
simply
It
communication.
does.
I don't think it's relevant as far as my work schedule. I think with all the forms of communication, which includes emails, which I check numerous times throughout the day. I think it just plain and simply comes down to communication, and I think Tim needs to be the communicator to all of us to make sure that we all, for the most part, have the same information so that we can make educated and informed decisions.
Well, you had a lot of questions during the union negotiations. When it was brought to the meeting to approve these things, you said, well, I didn't hear anything about this.
Correct.
Well, you don't, because it's a committee. There's a personnel committee that works with Tim and with the union negotiations. Now, you will not get, any of the business agents will not discuss, will not have a union negotiation in a public meeting. We ran into that a couple of years ago, if you remember. I think you were on the commission.
Yeah, I don't know where you're going with this. I understand that as far as committees. That's not what I was discussing here. That had nothing
Well,
to do with
it's-
committees and decisions at that point in time. When that was brought to us and some changes, we were not informed. And we should have been prior to that. I mean, I don't recall the specific details, but
Well, if we're involved in a negotiation, we're involved for 2-3 hours in negotiation. To give you 2-3 hours of what exactly happened,
no, but a very simplified email would have been sufficient. Or some type of data to review.
I don't know
before
that
it
I
came
would
to
have
the
been able
decision.
to cover every point that you had a question about.
It wasn't your job to, it was Tim's job to.
Well, I don't think that he could convey every point that you have a question about without knowing the point that you got the question about. As the information come out, you may have another
Again,
point that you want to ask.
In my opinion, we're kind of off task here. That wasn't my point of all of this, but
Well, I know it
again, I
isn't,
think
but
it comes down to communication and I think Tim needs, when questions are brought, I think they need to be directed to Tim so Tim can find the information out and then disperse it to all of us.
I get that, but at the same time, a 2-hour meeting can involve a lot of information that's hard to put down into 3 sentences in an email. Now, one thing I'd like to see in it going forward, talked about this before, back when they had 7 people on the board, they used to have an active finance committee. And if you listen to any of the stories around the county building, the other commissioner, Scott, long before me, was a spearhead of that finance committee. Correct, Karen? Mark as undersheriff had to sit in front of the finance committee. It was a very active committee. I'd like to see that brought back. The only thing different is the third person on that committee now cannot be a commissioner. It'll have to be the administrator. And I'd like to see something like that on a regular basis, that two commissioners and the administrator is talking actively on a regular basis to department heads. Some departments not as much as others because of spending, but some more than that. I don't know. Tim, am I out of line with that?
Well, all these concepts are, valid for consideration. Not a wrong answer. I don't,
like that.
and I think I've said this before, as these conversations come up, we will never perfect this. There will always be something that somebody's not going to know. It's just, we're not going to totally fix it. I do think since I've been here, things have gotten better. And I think about the seamless docs and the personnel action request forms. I understand before you wouldn't necessarily know when a new employee was hired or who had been promoted or who had a step increase. You're seeing a lot of that now. I got into the data here a couple of days ago. There've been close to 150 of these that you've seen, and they become routine. And so we don't even bother to think about it anymore. But I'd like to use that as an example of how we can improve that communication. It just becomes automatic. Somebody pushes a button and everybody gets it. And makes it very easy that way versus trying to remember next time somebody calls to tell them this, or to try to remember to do that email at the end of the day to cover a topic. So much of that we can do, I think will help us get to that goal. But I'm not confident we will ever get there, at a perfection level.
Agreed, but you also agree that this is a time to remind everyone of that and put this back out on the table again.
It is, and I
to
think
reinitiate
that's
it.
going back to that last sentence again, when we talk about priority of various goals. I mean, this is perfect. This is a perfect one to throw out there. And if there are specific things that the board wants to see happen, we can be very specific, but just keep it on the radar. Keeps us reminded, okay, this is something we want to try to remember, as much as we can. Again, we won't reach perfection, but it keeps it in front of us, keeps it a contemporary topic.
Thank you.
Well, I think the bottom line is, like I believe Craig's trying to put out there, we're all put in committees, and the other commissioners are not gonna know what went on in that committee. And, we can eventually sit down with you maybe and talk to you, or talk to Mary to, put it out there to the other commissioners, the high points of it. You're not gonna know every.
I don't think anybody's asking for any specifics, but a general information is courteous.
Every committee should have a decided outcome of a meeting and a set of minutes. Right, it should be communicated to the rest of the board through Tim. I think that's all we're getting to. When we can't obviously be in every meeting that committee's in, but whatever that committee decides is obviously eventually going to have to be approved by the board if it's money involved. And
Especially.
the quicker we can get that decided outcome of that meeting to us, the better.
That's why I say the high points.
And we're reporting committee reports two meetings a month. Well, Parks and Rec meetings that Ron and I sat on, we talked about a lot of different things, and we got two active parks going on. We got projects at both of them. It's not nothing that knocks the world down, but it's in its own little realm. It's busy, we got a lot of people. The zoning and planning, I mean, like I say, 7-8 months working on these text amendments, all the different discussions about it. We take it back, chew on it for a month, come back and chew on it some more. Reducing the size of the home, was not something I was in agreement. And I agreed with in the beginning, but as I looked at it, yeah, well, I could live in a smaller home that's 720. I'm a single person. I could easily live in a smaller home. So if I was here in the area and made $45,000 a year, I'm not gonna be able to afford a 1,700 square foot house. Even 12 is gonna be pretty close. It's more house than I need. You know, I got rooms I don't even walk in my own house now, you know, I mean, I can live in a smaller space. And so it convinced me that, yeah, hey, there's a specific, there can be a use for that.
Are you gonna, can you distribute that evaluation form to all of us? Can you make?
I can,
email it to
yes.
us?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I kind of motioned to Mary, asked her to,
Perfect.
I
Thanks,
gave her
Mary.
some sign language.
Item 4E, quarterly budget adjustments.
Clean
Tim, is
up
that you?
hot chocolate.
So I'll walk through the highlights. This is the second quarterly budget adjustment for this year, which means we're halfway through the fiscal year. Again, just hitting the highlights, beginning at the bottom of the first page. The swamp taxes came in a little bit higher than what we budgeted. We know that's for sure. So no point in waiting to make that change in the revenue. Two major ones. The first one, the state grants, an additional state grant for what I'm not sure quite yet, but $115,965 of additional unbudgeted revenue has come in. And then the local community stabilization grant of over $255,000 came in. So new revenue to put into the revenue side of the budget. That $12,515, that's the state's grant to us for that internal control audit. Those funds have come in. Election review, our election revenue came in not budgeted. Judges' fringes was not aligned. And all of these things where you see where there wasn't a line before, when we do the 23 budget, we capture this now. There'll be a line in there and we'll just determine whether or not that's going to be a revenue for the coming year or not. The other one, we raised the age grant revenue that is associated with the 17-year-olds being removed from the correctional facility here, keeping the juveniles away from the adults. Prosecuting attorney receives a welfare fraud incentive grant, and those are hit and miss from year to year. The road patrol grant that came from the state this year, almost $5,600 additional came to the county this year. So you see that. Interest rates are going up. That's already resulted in additional funds for the county, and they will probably continue to go up through the end of the year. So you may see more revisions to that as we go. Now, a major one on the next page, the district court statute costs. We had budgeted $450,000 to date. Halfway through the year, they brought in about $65,000, and I think now is the time to recognize that that revenue will not hit its goal. Now, having said that, this only takes us through March 31st. By the time we get to the end of the summer, that could shoot up. So if that happens and we need to make another adjustment upward, we can do it. But right now, I'm going to sound the alarm and say, I don't think we're going to meet the 450. Let's drop that so that we're not fooling ourselves and end up with a problem later on in the year. We did receive $600 in donations for the sheriff posse. I want to stop on this one for a second. There is an expense, a couple of expenses that went out for sheriff posse as well. This is not an activity we budgeted for. Now, why didn't we budget for it? Well, it's one of those sort of inactive things. It's not taking any tax revenue. It's been dependent strictly on donations that have come in. Typically, this is dealt with as its own fund, like we do with the Canine Fund. Same type of concept. Canine Fund receives donations. Those funds are segregated and used only for that purpose. Same is true with the sheriff posse. And while I've added it here, this will be corrected. I will just characterize this more as an accounting typo. It really should have been its own fund. So what I'll do is get with our accounting people, we'll get the fund assigned, fund number assigned to it and get that taken care of. But for now, there's money sitting there. We need to account for it. Here it is. Right now, it's just going to sit in the general fund. Probably another amendment that we'll do later on in the year that will take it and put it in its own fund. And we did that with the building fund too a couple of years ago. So it's a simple process. We just have to go through the motions to do it. Tether revenue is coming in higher. Marine enforcement charges for services and bail bonds fees are new. Those were not lines that we had in the budget before. I think the marine enforcement charge, it might have something to do with Lake Ogemaw. So special money that came in for that. So, something we'll keep in mind when we form the budget for next year. The last two was a mistake I had on our last resolution. This is the monies that were being used for that folding, whatever that machine that Karen got, folding sorter, whatever it is. I named the wrong fund, just correcting that. So that's an in and out. So overall, $210,000 in additional revenue. On the other side of this, we did have some expenses that we need to pay attention to. And, I swore I would remember what this 12,630 was in the non-department, and I'm drawing a blank on it. It was something that we all knew about. Oh, no, it was the tax tribunal. So there was a cost, we had to repay on the tax tribunal. So that's being put in as non-departmental. District court adding 42,224. Why would we do such a thing? Well, that's the judge's salary that was not budgeted, and it needs to be budgeted. We've taken in the money, so obviously the judge will need to be paid. The explanation on this, when the budgets were put together, and I talked with the district court administrator about this, there was a zero entry there, and so that's what carried through adoption of the budget. In talking with the court administrator, the explanation was, we've never put money in that. That's always been added later by somebody else. That's unusual, but it kind of makes sense because, you think of it as a personnel cost, but it's actually a contract cost. This is a contract situation. The judge is not an employee of the county. So, it was odd, but, we've circled that now. That won't happen next year, but we do have to pay the judge. So that's being added.
So where does the annual salary go that the judge is making?
And this is only part of the annual salary. It's accounted for in our system as a contract. And so what we're doing is matching what the state is actually paying as a state employee. So our contract is really with the state to make the disbursement.
And
Our contribution.
Roscommon makes a contribution, probably almost matching that.
They probably do for their district judge, and you'll saw the revenue. There actually some revenue that came in because of some benefits of the judge.
Well, it's a district court and it's the judge, so it's.
Right.
and
So
Roscommon is the district,
Yeah, we have shared revenue.
shared revenue.
this is one more argument why the state should just take this all over and
Right.
not bother us with it. But bottom line, that needs to be corrected. The next two is kind of nice that they're back to back. We had the motion a few meetings ago to get the AV equipment in the annex building. We said we'd move 4,000 from contingency and put it into IT, and that's what this is. We're moving it from one activity, putting it in the other. Planning Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals. I don't see zoning board on here, I'm not sure, but in both of those, when the budget spreadsheets were put out, they were based on the structure that we had the prior year. In the prior year, Ryan Veeder was a contract employee and did not receive any benefits. So when his budget spreadsheet was given to him, the health insurance benefit line was not open, nor was the retirement. And so it was missed. So now we're having to say, oh, okay, we missed that. We need to account for health insurance and for the retirement benefit that he now earns as a full-time employee. Probation and parole, the $1,300 is expenses from a prior year, I believe, just the invoice timing came in. The last time we did a quarterly adjustment, we zeroed out that budget entirely, but probation and parole did have within their fund, had a fund balance. So we'll be able to take care of that expense. And then finally, there's that sheriff posse on the expense side of that calculation. So the next page, you just see the brief explanation for each of those that I just went through and gives you an idea of what that does to the controllable expenses or personnel expenses or whatever they might be. And then finally, you see that grouping of what those definitions mean. On the next page, I've given you just a brief summary of where each of the departments stand in terms of their budgets at the halfway point through the year. It's very easy to look at these and really focus on those that are over 50% to say we might have an issue here, or to look at those that are, say, under 10%. Maybe we over budgeted somewhere. So those are the ones you tend to focus on. When you look at some of these, very specifically that non-departmental at 100%, well, the only expense we plan on is that tax tribunal expense. So we expect that one to be maxed out now. We don't expect anything more like that to happen. I did take a look at tracking the overtime that we discussed on the last budget. Whatever they're doing right now has stabilized that. However, there was an incident this week that's going to cause, we're going to be down a deputy, which is going to require some overtime. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that again to make sure that we're not going to get ourselves into trouble. And those things happen. In this case, I guess we can say accidents happen, where in this case, our officer is going to have to be off for 2 to 3 weeks for recovery. So they're going to have to backfill that shift. Probably will cause additional overtime. But having a system like this helps us keep on top of that. Looking at some of the others, sheriff posse is at 100%, but I don't expect any other costs, but we'll work that one through. On the right side are all the special funds, and just to give you a brief update on what each of those are. The jail bond payment has been made, so that's at 100%. The land bank is at 100%, but it didn't have a couple $100 anyway, so it's not, yeah. District Health, we've made our annual payment there, so you wouldn't expect any more to come out of that. The remaining sheets are those specific departments and activities that had movement. This will give you the line-by-line breakdown of where those changes were. So if we're saying personnel expenses, you'll see which personnel expenses we're talking about on the department level basis. So this is a little bit more involved in the first quarter budget adjustment that we did. You're going to see the third quarter come in July, and I expect that one to be very busy because we will have a lot more focused idea of where a lot of our revenues and expenses are going to head. And hopefully we'll be able to make adjustments there so that when we get to the end of the year, we're not faced with any surprises or any unexplained expenses or, let's say, orphaned revenue that we don't know what to do with.
I appreciate this. Thank you. Any comments, commissioners?
Just that I'd still like to see, more of a quarterly based report showing us our historical,
You want a comparison from the previous year, correct?
not just the previous year, but for each quarter. Or maybe even a graph for each account, so we can see how we're progressing, if we've controlled costs, maybe if they got out of control. And then, I guess some of them are, I'm a little bit confused about, like administrator costs, shouldn't we be at 50% right now with those?
Yeah, you would think that, but a number of factors go in. For the administrator, for instance, we actually added a position partway through the year, so that's going to throw that curve off a little bit. It won't be exactly. We have some of the benefits don't come in right on time. I'll use health insurance as a good example. When we front loaded the HSAs, when you look at that line, a lot of the departments look like they're approaching 3/4 of their budget. And halfway through the year, well, we front loaded a lot of our expense. So you'll see that pace slow down. So we expected to see that, but it's where we don't expect it that, we raise alarm. And that's why the departments, you really need to go line by line in their budgets and make sure they're monitoring those things. Contracts are another one that throw you off. If you have an annual contract and you pay it at the front end of the year, that's going to throw off the overall percentage.
And that's where I'd like to see a comparison, quarterly or even monthly, and what our expectations of those budgets are going to be for the coming months. But do we know things like that we know it's going to stabilize, or we've already paid, all the taxes for the year?
Right. And we're getting there. We're still battling the data conversion, but by this time next year, we'll be able to do that on the year-to-year comparison, because we didn't have it for the prior year. BSNA didn't pick it up at that level. But when you do get into the budget reports that you see with at the regular meetings, they're usually the last PDF that's in there. There is a column that's on the far right that tells you what the prior year budget did. we're still working and we're almost to the point where I'll be able to show you on July 1 last year, where were we on this line? We'll be able to do that. We're just not quite there yet. The data is still catching up, or software is still catching up with our data to where we'll be able to do it. But there are actually systems within built into the BSNA software where we can start doing even line by line projections if we want to. I don't know if you want to get to that level of detail, but certainly by department, show us some projections on what we might expect. That's going to be really handy when we evaluate things like overtime. So is there a particular part of the year where we're particularly stressed and we need to put people on overtime? Allows us to do a little bit better planning. And those departments that have that can do a little bit better scheduling in advance. Employees know this time of year, we're going to be really hit hard. It's just where we are. And you're going to know that. And I think everybody's lives become a little bit more predictable. Not necessarily convenient, but a little more predictable moving forward.
Your expenses.
Almost
and
there.
revenue
We're
changes.
really close and to being able to do that. So the one column's already been added. We've got a lot of capacity within the software to do that. That's actually breaking it down for you right now on a line by line basis. So yeah, we're almost there.
So
I agree. Well, we talked about this at the first quarter adjustment, is putting in a column showing that first quarter adjustment in addition to this second quarter. So in this draft, it's just, I would like to had seen just a column that said first quarter adjustment.
Well, that
Most of them would be zero, but there would be a few got adjusted up or down. And then I can look at the second quarter, and then, of course, when you fill in the third and the fourth, I can see that trend.
Yeah.
Do we adjust only in a certain time of year, or did we just keep adjusting every quarter? You know,
easily done. So what you're seeing right now on that column, that's
revenue side too.
the one that says FY 2022 budget as of February 24th. Those numbers include all the adjustments we did. It doesn't tell you where they were,
Right,
because this resolution is specifically focused on the second quarter.
right.
But it's very easy for me to create a spreadsheet that I'm literally just adding a column for each quarter. So you
That's all it is.
Yeah.
One quarter tells me if we adjusted up or down or zero for each of the business units. That's all.
More transparency as to, the problems that occurred and what we did to address them. And we can show that through historical data throughout the year.
Just like there's one or halfway down, visiting judge. If we made an adjustment up in the first quarter that we had a visiting judge, did we do the same thing in the second quarter? Well, this year we could say, well, our judge was leaving, so
Right.
we had to bring in a visiting judge. We see and we can explain the trend. This is huge. I mean, I haven't, in 5 years of being here, I have not seen this detail.
keep in mind your decision to go to BSNA made this happen.
Okay.
you need a resolution for this
Right.
on Tuesday, correct?
Right. So this is the draft resolution.
Are you guys good with that?
Yes.
Commissioners?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Anything else we missed on the agenda?
No.
Okay, item 5, public comment. Is there any public comment in the room?
Is that
Any
good?
public comment on the phone? No public comment on the phone? Reminder, the next regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners is the annual equalization meeting scheduled for Tuesday, April 12th at 9 a.m. This change has been made to comply with the Michigan statute MCL 209.5.
Wasn't Randy gonna come in and give us a preview of that?
We've got that right here.
Yeah, you've got the
Okay.
spoiler here, and that came in, as you can see, a little after 8 last night. He
Yeah.
finally got everything to work out. But this is going to be the main event Tuesday. So first up on the agenda,
Tuesday takes the place of Thursday.
right?
Correct. We have that, Mr. Commissioner Newbecker?
Tuesday.
Anything else, commissioners?
Nothing.
Motion to adjourn at 10:26. Support from Commissioner Serbrook, all in favor?
Bye.
Motion adjourned. Thanks, guys.
I